That's going to be great. Brendan's face is not showing, but I'm sure he thinks that I look less silly now, right? That was more natural.
What is time? I literally have no idea. Any day.
It doesn't exist. It really doesn't exist. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Backstage with Brenna. My name is Brenna, and we're still in quarantine. Today, I'm here with a very special guest in our series of alumni interviews. And this time, we have our alumni interview, grad student edition. So everyone, give it up for our next guest, Lindsey Mantoan.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for coming and talking to me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, do you think we could start by you telling our viewers what you minored in undergrad, and then how you made the decision to pursue grad school?
Yeah. Okay, so I did my undergraduate work at Princeton, and I majored in architecture. That was not a great choice for me, which I did not realize until the start of my senior year. And when I went to the dean and said, I don't really like architecture, the dean said, okay, but we are going to graduate you in 4 years, so you're going to stick to architecture. But I had discovered theater by doing theater at Princeton. There are a ton of student-run theaters on campus. And then there was a theater program that you can get a certificate in, which is like a minor, that would offer some classes. So I took a class or two, and I learned by doing. And by the time I graduated, I had fallen in love. I hadn't really done any theater before college. I got into it because I play the bass. And
oh, no way.
Yeah. And I was one of two double bass players on campus. So all of the musicals came knocking and asking me to play bass in their pit. And
so it was through orchestra involvement.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So then I graduated, and I worked as a stage manager. I worked in the production office of the Goodman. I worked in the production office as an assistant technical director at ACT. And so I had done a little bit of directing. I had done a little bit of designing, never acting. That was not my thing. But I had done all of these things, and I knew I wanted to do theater, but none of these things felt quite right to me. And I don't know how it came to my attention that I could be a theater professor who was a historian theorist. Because at Princeton, the certificate program there was very practice-based, right? Okay. It was, you take acting classes or design classes, maybe stage management or something like this, but not like theater history, right? Not like queer performance, none of this. Because it's just a certificate program. It's not a department. So when it finally came to me that was a possible career path, it was like the clouds parted and the sun shone.
And the music started playing, and
very angelic. Yes, it was great.
Yeah.
So then I went to grad school. I started off in a performance as public practice program at UT Austin. It's a great program with a very confusing name. Because what is that? Yeah. But it's basically like community-based, activist, feminist performance.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
That's
amazing.
Badass.
It was super badass. And then I went to Stanford, and I did my PhD there.
So was there anything that you expected out of the PhD program, or like out of doing research, that maybe turned out differently? Or how did expectations meet up with reality for that experience?
To me, the word research always meant like you were in a lab wearing a white coat titrating something.
Yeah. with the, what are they called? With the pipettes.
Yes, those things. Yeah, and that was never my thing. So trying to wrap my head around like what is theater research was a really weird journey and really fun to sort of discover. It can be going to archives, it can be going to see shows, it can be just reading a lot of criticism and history, letters, gossip. Gossip
Ooh.
Is totally part of research.
Is gossip is research?
Oh yeah.
Wait, that changes everything actually.
I know, right? But especially for communities that maybe are not the sort of dominant community in any given historical period.
Yeah.
The things that get labeled gossip, because the label gossip is very political, right?
Totally.
Can be a way for minority communities to have their stories gain traction in the way that we start to understand history. So especially for queer communities, gossip is a super important historical artifact.
Going into your new imagining of research, like when you're at Stanford, is there any particular topics that you were really excited to like be able to delve into?
Yes, so many. And that's something that I think it can be hard for scholars to navigate, right? Because there are a lot of theater scholars, friends of mine, even from TAPS, who have like a very clear research agenda. They know what they're working on, and they're going to work on it forever, right? They're going to come at it from slightly different angles. They're going to deal with new information, but that is their sort of brand or identity. Mine has been way more varied than that. Which maybe some people think makes me hard to sort of pin down. At TAPS, I mostly researched war and performance. My dissertation was on the Iraq War and the ways that political performances conscripted people into supporting that war. And then also I had chapters that analyzed the performances that came out of it, right? So documentary plays, satirical news programs, adaptations of Greek tragedy to the context in Iraq. This was a big thing. And then after I graduated TAPS, I added another chapter before I turned it into a book. And that was on popular culture and the Iraq War, because the Hunger Games is like the author, Suzanne Collins, has said, this is about the Iraq War. And
wait, I did not realize that. And I was huge into Hunger Games. I did not even.
Do you have the prequel? It came out yesterday. Yeah, so when I was at Stanford, my research was very much about war, I think in part because I had so many feelings about that conflict. And I had to work through them. And this is one of the amazing things about being a scholar, right? If you're having feelings about something and you don't know what to do with your feelings, you can research the shit out of them and then like write about them and then kind of process your feelings that way. And it can be really useful. I have published multiple books on war and militarization and performance, and that was great and also gave me bad dreams and was in no way uplifting. So my next book-length project is on musicals. It's on high school musicals on Broadway in the 2010s. There's this book written by Stacey Wolf, who is the premier musical theater scholar, and she basically goes decade by decade in the history of musicals, and she gives each decade a personality.
Okay.
She stops in 2008 with In the Heights.
Okay.
So my research is going to sort of pick up this project and extend it into the 2010s. Okay. And I'm going to argue that the personality of Broadway in the 2010s was at least in part defined by high school musicals. Musicals that are set in a high school, about the high school experience.
Absolutely.
There are scenes that take place in the hallways or in the classrooms.
Absolutely.
There's the party song, right? There's the major school event like the prom or the school play or something like this that everybody has to kind of grapple with.
Speaking of the prom, which was great.
Yep. So the prom and Heathers and Dear Evan Hansen and Bring It On, Mean Girls. No, okay, Heathers was not actually on Broadway. It was off Broadway. I'm teaching a class called The History of the Broadway Musical right now, and we've been talking about issues like this.
Oh, that is so cool. Oh my gosh, I want to take that. So moving on to a next question that I'm really excited to hear the answer for. As a working professional who now teaches students, what are some misconceptions about performance or research, / scholarship that you see students have that you'd like to set the record straight on?
So I want to like even back that up just a little bit and just say like the thing that I wish I had known when I was an undergrad. Because I didn't know how to college. I didn't know what the college was. I didn't know what office hours were. Professors were super intimidating, and I was like scared to look at them. So the first thing is like professors are people, and for the most part, we became professors because we think students are fascinating and we want to get to know you, right? So get to know your professors. Hang out with them, go to their office hours. You don't even have to have, I was like, I can't go to office hours. I don't have a smart enough question to ask. You don't have to have that.
I feel that way all the time, to be honest.
You can just show up, right? And you can just kind of talk about things and not have an agenda. Don't like stay for hours, right? But like, just show up and get to know your professors, and the exchange between the two of you will lead you to interesting questions to ask, right? But if you're looking for a question to ask, an easy one is just, hey, what are you working on right now?
That's awesome. And I feel like I definitely needed to hear that. And I hope that everyone else absorbs it as well. Um, One last question to fit in before we run out of time. Do you have a fun memory from your time at TAPS that you would care to reminisce on?
So many. Okay, first I just have to ask, are all the TAPS parties like that get catered, do they still have shrimp?
A lot of them have shrimp.
I mean,
A
okay.
lot of
So
them
then
do.
here's what you need to know. When you leave Stanford and you go to like campus-wide parties, there's not shrimp. There's usually not even food at all. I showed up to all these parties like after I left Stanford and I was like, where's the food? It
Yeah.
just wasn't there. So, okay, cherish the catered events. The thing about Stanford that is so beautiful is if you have ideas, there are resources there to help you execute them. You just have to ask. And this is another thing I totally didn't know as an undergrad, that you can take initiative about things and ask for things. So it was maybe my third year there that, so Prop 8, had passed in California, and then there was a trial about it, and this took a few years or whatever. And then after the trial, Dustin Lance Black, who's a playwright and a screenwriter, he took the transcripts from the trial and turned them into a documentary play. And I just thought the play was so compelling and the issue was so important that I wanted to direct a reading of it. So I got the rights to do that. And then I had an awesome stage manager. And that was Brendan Martin. So I had this idea.
Wow.
I got the idea late. TAPS had already announced their whole season. But I went to people who were in decision-making positions at TAPS and said, I want to do this thing. And, I was met with, what kind of budget did you have in mind? Right. And like, we kind of went back and forth a little bit, but I was given some funds. I was given help, like securing a space and just information about who to contact about publicity. I mean, obviously Stephanie, but people in the law school, right, and how to do publicity in other venues even.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, I was super supported in this project that felt like very personal to me as a person in a gay marriage, otherwise known as just marriage. Just, I felt materially supported and emotionally supported.
Absolutely.
It was very cool.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing and for giving us your insight, your perspective. Getting to hear your experience has been so wonderful, and I'm really excited for everyone watching to be able to hear it too. So thank you for joining me today. It really has been a pleasure to meet you and to get to talk to you.
Absolutely. And you know what, if there are Stanford students who have questions about what the academic path might look like, I'm happy to talk. So just let me know.
This has been another episode of Backstage with Brenna. Tune in next week to hashtag Get Peer Advised.